The leather portfolio slipped from my fingers as my father's words echoed through the boardroom. Laya will be taking over all your projects, effective immediately. The spreadsheets I'd spent months perfecting scattered across the polished oak table, financial projections and strategy documents fanning out like fallen leaves. Behind my father, Laya's glossy smile widened, triumph glinting in her eyes. My lungs seized. Each breath came shorter than the last as I gripped the edge of the conference table, the room tilting slightly. Around us, board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, ties suddenly too tight, gazes fixed anywhere but at me. But the Pacific expansion was my initiative. I managed, my voice strained but steady. I've been developing these systems for 3 years. My father straightened his Italian silk tie, a gift I'd given him last Christmas. Blisana, business isn't personal. Laya brings fresh perspective, connections we need. He gestured to my stepsister, barely 5 years younger than me. The board agrees this is best for Monroe Industries. The board members, men who had watched me grow up, who had attended my MBA graduation, nodded on cue, puppets with invisible strings, all leading back to my father's hands. You'll still have a position here, he continued, not meeting my eyes. Junior analyst in marketing should suit you better. Less pressure. My name is Blisana. I'm 32, and I built my father's tech company from regional player to global contender. This is the story of how I reclaimed my worth in a language only success can speak. 3 years of sleepless nights and canceled vacations crystallized in that single moment of betrayal. I'd redesigned the company's logistics platform, doubled quarterly profits, secured partnerships with 3 Fortune 500 clients, all while Laya was busy posting yacht parties on Instagram. Now she would inherit my legacy while I was demoted to analyzing market trends for moisturizer campaigns. I should have seen it coming. 6 months ago, my father had remarried after a whirlwind romance with Catherine, Laya's mother. At first, I'd welcomed them, ignoring the whispers about Catherine's history of marrying into money, ignoring how Laya suddenly appeared at strategy meetings without invitation, ignoring the way my father began reviewing my work with new skepticism. The boardroom emptied, executives filing out with mumbled congratulations to Laya. Only she, my father, and I remained in the sudden silence. Don't be dramatic, Blisana, my father said, closing his leather folio. This is a good thing. You've been working too hard anyway. Laya stepped forward, her manicured hand touching my arm with false sympathy. I'll take good care of your little projects, she said, her voice honey-sweet. Maybe you can assist me sometimes if you need mentoring. Something inside me, pride maybe, or self-preservation, hardened into resolve. I straightened, removed her hand from my arm, and met my father's gaze. You've made your choice, I said quietly, each word precise as a surgeon's cut. Now I'll make mine. My father's expression shifted from dismissal to wariness. What does that mean? It means I quit. I began gathering my scattered documents, effective immediately. Don't be foolish, he snapped, his voice razor sharp. Where will you go? What will you do? No one succeeds without connections in this industry. I tucked the last paper into my bag, a strange calm washing over me. I guess we'll find out. You're making a mistake, he called as I walked toward the door. You'll never make it without me, Blisana. You'll be back within a month. I paused at the threshold, not turning back. Actually, Dad, I think this is the first right decision I've made in years. The office door closed behind me with a soft click that echoed with finality. I walked through the building I'd practically lived in for years, past colleagues who averted their eyes, through the lobby with its massive Monroe Industries sign I'd helped design. Outside, rain pelted the sidewalk, but I barely felt it. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Don't expect references or severance. I slipped the phone back in my pocket, tilting my face up to let the rain mingle with tears no one could see. That night, in my apartment, I emptied my savings account and bought a domain name, MonroviaSystemsAI.com. The name was both a reclamation and a farewell, my mother's maiden name, Monrovia, before she married Richard Monroe, the name I should have honored all along. The following morning, I woke before dawn and coded until my fingers cramped. building the foundation for an AI logistics platform more advanced than anything Monroe Industries had imagined. By week's end, I'd sublet my apartment and moved into a tiny studio above a laundromat, its constant rumble matching my determination. Months blurred together in a haze of coding, cold calls, and coffee shop meetings. Each rejection hardened my resolve. Each unanswered email pushed me to work harder. I refined algorithms while eating instant ramen, pitched investors between freelance jobs that barely covered rent, and ignored Laya's social media posts showcasing my former office, my former team. 8 months in, everything changed. A venture capitalist who had initially passed on my pitch returned after testing my prototype. His investment brought others. Suddenly, Monrovia Systems had funding, a real office, and a growing team of engineers who believed in my vision. By the 18-month mark, our AI logistics solution was revolutionizing supply chains across 3 continents. Major news outlets featured stories about the breakout tech entrepreneur changing international commerce. Not once did they mention I was Richard Monroe's daughter. I'd become my own headline. Which brings us to this morning, 2 years after walking out of Monroe Industries. Terminal 3, International Departures. I told the driver as I settled into the back seat of the company car. I have a 10:30 flight to catch. Sophie, my executive assistant, handed me a tablet displaying the day's schedule. The Global Tech Summit organizers confirmed you'll open tonight's event as keynote sponsor. Your father and stepsister are on the attendee list. A familiar tightness coiled in my chest. Of course they are, I murmured. Richard never could resist a networking opportunity. What they didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that Monrovia Systems had purchased the Global Tech Network 3 weeks ago. Tonight's summit wasn't just another industry event. It was mine. The airport terminal buzzed with activity as I made my way toward the premium security line. That's when I heard it. Laya's distinctive laugh cutting through the crowd, followed by my father's commanding voice. "Move faster, Blazana," he barked at someone ahead. "You're holding us up again." I froze, momentarily confused. I hadn't spoken to my father in 2 years. Then I realized he wasn't speaking to me, but to a young woman struggling with luggage. His assistant, I presumed, who apparently shared my name. My father and Laya stood in the first-class line, not yet noticing me. His new wife, Catherine, hovered nearby, examining her boarding pass with obvious satisfaction. "Maybe she's nervous," Laya said loudly, glancing at the assistant. "It's probably her first time seeing a plane up close." My father chuckled, making no attempt to hide his disdain. "She can't even afford economy. Don't expect her to know how airports work." Their laughter rippled through the terminal, drawing stares. The assistant's face flushed with humiliation as she adjusted her backpack strap. I should have walked away. This wasn't my battle, but watching another woman endure my father's casual cruelty awakened something fierce within me. Before I could reconsider, I approached the first-class line. My father saw me first, recognition dawning slowly, followed by confusion. "Blazana?" he said, as if encountering a ghost. Laya's smile vanished. Catherine's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot upward. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "Heading to New York for the summit, I presume." My father recovered quickly, straightening his posture. "Yes, you're attending as well." In a manner of speaking. I turned to his assistant, who looked between us with wide eyes. "I'm Blazana Monroe, original version, not the replacement." Understanding flickered across her face, followed by a small smile. Laya stepped forward, designer heels clicking aggressively. "We're in first class," she announced, waving her boarding pass like a victory flag. "Premium seats, champagne before takeoff." "Enjoy that," I replied softly. "Don't be bitter," she sneered. "Some of us just make better life choices." That barb struck deeper than I wanted to admit. My father had often reduced my departure to a tantrum, a poor decision made in emotional haste. "Do us a favor," my father said, lowering his voice. "Try not to embarrass the family name. People talk." I met his gaze directly. "People always talk, Dad." "It's what they say later that matters." Before he could reply, the loudspeaker announced boarding for their flight. They gathered their bags and headed for the gate, Laya turning to toss one final barb. "See you in coach if you can afford the ticket." Their laughter echoed as they disappeared into the boarding tunnel. I stood motionless, breathing steadily through the familiar ache of their dismissal. A voice behind me broke through the moment. "Miss Monrovia!" I turned to find Captain Granville, crisp in his Navy uniform, posture military straight. "Your jet is ready, ma'am," he said, voice carrying clearly across the terminal. "We'll begin pre-flight whenever you're ready." The words sliced through the airport noise like thunder. My father froze mid-step at the gate entrance. Laya turned, her expression collapsing. Other passengers stopped to stare at the exchange. I smiled slowly. "Perfect timing, Captain." I was getting tired of standing. Gasps rippled through nearby travelers as Captain Granville gestured toward the private terminal beyond the security barrier. Through the glass windows, the sleek Monrovia Systems jet gleamed on the tarmac, its midnight blue logo catching the morning light. "Jet?" Laya's voice cracked on the word. "Her?" "Yes, ma'am," Granville replied with professional courtesy. "Miss Monrovia owns it." I met my father's stunned gaze across the terminal. "You were right, Dad," I called, my voice steady. "I can't afford economy." I paused deliberately. "It's too small for me now." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked toward the private terminal, each step measured and calm, despite my racing heart. I thanked Captain Granville and followed him through the security barrier toward the private terminal, where our company jet awaited. The glass doors opened and sunlight spilled across the tarmac. Wind whipped my hair as the hum of engines filled the air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small in my father's presence. I felt untouchable. The door of the luxury jet closed behind me with a soft hiss, sealing out the chaos of the airport. The scent of polished leather and freshly brewed espresso replaced the sterile terminal air. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Monrovia," said Captain Granville, now smiling with a quiet respect that came from 2 years of flying together. "New York is clear skies all the way." I settled into the cream-colored seat by the window as the engines rumbled to life beneath the floor. The city stretched below like a story I'd already finished reading. As the jet began to taxi, my phone buzzed. "Dad" flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Blissanna," his voice snapped, sharp as ever. "What kind of joke are you playing?" "No joke," I replied coolly. "I just stopped living by your version of success." "I asked you to be practical," he said. "Instead, you ran off chasing dreams." "Dreams," I corrected, "that built the company you're still dismissing, Dad. The one I designed before you replaced me with Leia." Silence stretched between us. Then his voice dropped lower. "You could have stayed, Blissanna. You didn't have to walk away." I gazed out the window, remembering that day in the boardroom, the scattered papers, the smug smiles, the moment everything I'd built was handed to someone else as if I'd never existed. "You're right," I said softly. "I didn't have to. I chose to." The line went dead. My executive administrator approached, setting a folder on the table beside me. "Your itinerary, ma'am. Meeting with investors in Manhattan at 3 p.m. Your security team will escort you from the terminal." "Thank you," I said, closing the folder. He hesitated. "If I may say so, it's not every day someone takes back everything they lost." I smiled faintly. "It's not about taking it back. It's about becoming the person they said you'd never be." The engines roared as the plane lifted off, smooth and powerful. I watched the clouds swallow the ground, my reflection faint in the glass. 2 years ago, I'd walked out of my father's office with nothing but a laptop, a handful of contacts, and a promise to myself that I'd never beg for opportunity again. While Laya flaunted her new title on social media, I worked nights coding, designing, building a startup no one believed in. When investors laughed, I kept going. When banks refused loans, I sold my car. When everything seemed impossible, I remembered my father's exact words, "You'll never make it without me." But I did. And now that silly idea he'd mocked, a revolutionary AI logistics platform, had become a global tech solution worth hundreds of millions. Every insult, every laugh, every door slammed in my face had built the woman sitting on this jet. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ma'am, the New York media has been calling. They heard you'll be attending the Global Tech Summit this evening. Do you want to make a statement?" I glanced at my phone screen. Another message from my father. Just one word this time. "How?" I typed back. "By becoming everything you thought I couldn't." The jet sliced through the clouds as sunlight bathed the cabin in gold. My reflection looked older, calmer, stronger. For years, I'd let them define me as the quiet daughter, the forgotten one. But now they would learn my name again, on billboards, in headlines, in every corner of the business world. Tonight, when I landed in Manhattan, the same family that had laughed at me would attend a summit sponsored by my company. They just didn't know it yet. I smiled as the city skyline rose in the distance. The real takeoff hadn't just happened in the air, it had started the day I walked away from them. The jet wheels kissed the runway with a low hum as Manhattan glimmered ahead like a challenge. I exhaled slowly, centering myself. Tonight wasn't just a business event, it was closure. Captain Granville escorted me down the private terminal steps to a waiting black SUV. The moment the tinted door closed, Sophie turned from the front seat, tablet in hand. "Everything's ready, ma'am. The Global Tech Summit begins in 2 hours. You'll open as the keynote sponsor." "Perfect," I said, my tone steady despite my racing pulse. "And the guest list?" She smiled knowingly. "Richard Monroe and family confirmed this morning." Of course they had. My father never missed a chance for publicity. What he didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that Monrovia Systems hadn't just sponsored the summit. It owned it. As the SUV glided through Manhattan, I glimpsed billboards flashing my company's logo, midnight blue against silver. 2 years ago, I was the invisible daughter. Tonight, I was the headline. The glass-covered venue sparkled under evening lights as we arrived. As I stepped out of the SUV onto the red carpet, the evening lights illuminated the glass-covered venue. Camera flashes greeted me as I stepped onto the red carpet wearing a sleek navy dress. Not designer branded, but confidently mine. A journalist called out, "Ms. Monrovia, is it true your company acquired the Global Tech Network?" I met her gaze with a measured smile. "Let's just say I like to own the places I was once denied entry to." Inside, chandeliers cast golden light over marble floors. Executives mingled, champagne flowed, conversations buzzed. All the trappings of the world that had once dismissed me. And then I saw them across the hall. My father deep in conversation with investors, Catherine polished at his side, Laya hovering nearby in a scarlet gown, her laugh carrying across the room just as it had at the airport. They hadn't noticed me yet. "Ms. Monrovia," the announcer called, stepping onto the stage. "Please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, the CEO of Monrovia Systems." Applause filled the hall as spotlights swept the crowd. My father turned toward the stage, clapping politely until recognition froze his hands mid-motion. Laya's champagne glass tilted dangerously as she stared. I ascended the steps to the podium, the microphone light warm against my face. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice steady. 2 years ago, I was told I would never belong in this room. Tonight, my company owns it. The audience laughed appreciatively, not realizing I meant it literally. I looked directly at my father as I continued. "I built Monrovia Systems from a single laptop in a studio apartment above a laundromat. No inheritance, no investors at first, just determination and the memory of being told I wasn't enough." Laya's expression twisted, but I continued. "People often ask what fuels success. For me, it was simple. Humiliation is a louder teacher than privilege." Applause rose, genuine and scattered. My father's hands remained frozen. After the speech, as the crowd dispersed to networking tables, I descended from the stage and made my way through the crowd toward where my father stood. He approached slowly, cautiously, as though crossing enemy territory. "Blissanna," he began, "I didn't know you were—" "Successful?" I interrupted, my tone soft but pointed. "No, you didn't. You were too busy celebrating my replacement." Laya stepped forward, designer heels clicking aggressively on marble. "We didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I said quietly. "At the airport, in the boardroom, every time you laughed at what you thought was my failure." I looked between them. But you forgot. Some of us rebuild in silence. My father studied the floor. You're still my daughter. I nodded. Yes, just not the one you defined. As the orchestra began to play, the crowd swirled around us. Business partners seeking introductions, journalists requesting interviews. My father stood lost amid the shifting dynamics, realizing the hierarchy had irrevocably changed. Tonight wasn't about victory. It was about rewriting the narrative they had assigned me. The evening had thinned to a soft hum of music and conversations. Investors raised toasts, journalists scribbled notes. But at the center of it all, Richard Monroe stood watching the daughter he'd once dismissed now commanding every spotlight in the room. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Their silence spoke volumes. Sophie approached with sparkling water. The media wants a closing statement before we wrap up. I took the glass, my eyes still on my father across the room. Let them wait a minute. Laya stood beside him, her confidence faltering into a nervous line. She whispered something, but Richard remained motionless. His expression had softened from arrogance to something less certain, maybe even regret. When I finally walked over, conversations around us quieted. He straightened his jacket, attempting to recover his dignity. "Blisana," he said quietly, "I should have known. You were always sharp. I just didn't think that I could succeed without you," I finished, my voice calm, almost kind. "You made that very clear." He exhaled heavily. "I said things I regret." "No," I replied, setting my glass on a nearby table. "You said things that built me." His tired eyes met mine. "You could have told me. We could have worked together." I smiled faintly. "You taught me that working with you meant losing myself." I didn't walk away to punish you. I walked away to remember who I was. Laya stepped forward, forcing a brittle laugh. "Come on, Blisana. Don't act like some hero. You got lucky with investors. That's all." I turned to her, expression unchanged. "Luck doesn't keep you in business for 2 years straight, and investors don't buy companies. They buy belief, something you've never had in anyone but yourself." Her face hardened. "You think this makes you better than us?" "No," I said simply. "It just makes me free." Behind me, the announcer called for closing remarks. Sophie gestured toward the stage, but I raised a hand. "One moment." I looked back at my father, my voice softening to something more genuine. "You know what hurt most? It wasn't losing the company. It was realizing my family only valued me when I was convenient." He swallowed hard. "You're right. I failed you." For a moment, I almost believed his sincerity. Almost. But some apologies come too late to matter. So instead of bitterness, I offered something unexpected. Grace. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "Not because you deserve it, but because I do. I've carried that weight long enough." He blinked, genuinely surprised. "Blisana." I stepped back, glancing at the glowing banner above the stage. Monrovia Systems, building the future. "You were right about one thing, Dad," I said with a small smile. "I couldn't afford economy. I was never meant to fly that low." With that, I turned toward the stage where the spotlight waited. The applause thundered as I delivered the final address of the evening, speaking about resilience, the power of rebuilding, and how being underestimated creates the strongest foundation for success. As I spoke, I saw my father and Laya near the exit, watching in silence while the audience rose to their feet. The daughter they'd mocked, now leading an empire they couldn't touch. When the applause finally faded, I stepped from the stage, heart steady. Sophie handed me my coat and whispered, "You did it." I looked back once more toward the doors. "No," I replied. "I just stopped letting them define what it meant." Outside, the city shimmered with 1,000 lights. My jet waited on the private airstrip, engines humming softly in anticipation. As I boarded, Captain Granville nodded respectfully. "Back to California, ma'am." I smiled. "Home, wherever that really is." And as the plane rose through the night sky, I thought of that moment in the boardroom 2 years ago, the scattered papers, the humiliation. Now, miles above them all, I finally understood. Some farewells aren't said with words. They're written in altitude. In the months that followed, my father attempted to reach out several times, leaving voicemails and sending emails suggesting we rebuild bridges. Laya even posted a congratulatory message on social media, though the calculated timing, right after our company valuation doubled, revealed the opportunism behind it. I maintained a cordial but distant relationship with them both, exchanging occasional professional courtesies at industry events, but never returning to the family dynamic that had nearly broken me. Some relationships are better honored in their evolution rather than their resurrection. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.